Hello everyone and welcome to the last panel of the very first Comics Summit, which is called Advocating for Comics. Whether or not we will arrive at an answer to the many questions or problems, real or imagined, in the span of an hour or less is debatable. Maybe if we do this again next year, we will forever be discussing advocating for comics. But wonderfully, I'm joined by Sarah, Jenny and Barry, who I imagine will be familiar to you all in some capacity. For the benefit of anyone listening at home, could you just introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Sarah Millman. I make NBCT. I talk a lot on Twitter. I play ukulele. I like Dungeons and Dragons. Don't talk to me about Dungeons and Dragons though, because I won't shut up. There you go.
I don't know how I can top that. Because you're going to end up by saying, and I make porn.
Well, you're ruining it. This is a weird panel.
I've got nothing.
Go on.
My name is Barry Nugent. I run a podcast called Geek Syndicate, which has been running for over a decade now, which makes me incredibly old. I'm also a self-published novelist. Out of that, I've got 10 one-shot comics which are based on characters from the novel and various other bits and bobs.
Right. I'm Jennie Gyllblad. I am a self-published comic creator and I work full-time in the indie scene, and I make web comics and fantasy comics and stuff, and I also make porn, but that's been ruined now.
Do you make porn?
I make pornography, everyone.
Porn, you say?
Comic pornography, everyone. Okay, yes.
And
just to make that clear.
And as I may like to contribute a few of my own thoughts to this panel, I feel by way of introduction, my name is John and I work on a comic called Afterlife Inc., for which I am a writer and creator. I'm also one quarter of Big Punch Studios. Somehow, amazingly, I just about curated this event this weekend, and also do an all-ages webcomic with my friend Ben. So hopefully that gives me credentials enough to join in the conversation with these pillars of British comics. Just because time is of an essence, I'm going to start with a somewhat kind of on-the-nose question. What annoys you about British comics, Sarah?
Oh no. I think just the fact, because basically I've been really nervous about this panel because I feel like I've been mouthing off about this for a really long time. So I think what really annoys me, and you touched on this yesterday, is that we all work so hard and we make such good things, and yet there's this massive stumbling block between actually getting our comics out there. And I think that annoys me the most, is that the scene is like comics itself is dominated by all of these IP and all of these massive publishers, and it's just like there are lots of people who are just as good as them, but because we don't have the right in, we can't get in, and that really annoys me over everything else, including like people throwing books at me and complaining that my kid could draw that over everything. Geez. Like that annoys me the most. Yeah, there you go.
I just have to say the same thing. It feels like there's an amazing variety of amazing artists and creators in the indie scene here, and nobody knows about us. That's what it feels like, at least. And I think that like we need to have some kind of, I don't know, visibility somehow. It just feels like whenever we're like at certain conventions as well, that we're not really being seen. In certain conventions you might be put in like a loft or something, or behind a pillar, or by the toilets or whatever, and then no signposting or whatever, because small press, who cares? So yeah, I don't like that.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that it's like,
yeah,
nobody knows who you are, so we're going to put you somewhere awful where nobody will find out who you are.
Exactly.
Great. Sorry, Barry.
We're all just going to be
I know. I'm trying really hard to not be sort of controversial, which is quite difficult.
Do it.
I don't like the term small press.
Yeah.
Because I feel it sets a certain expectation straight away in people's minds that we're small. We have small-minded thinking, small-minded ideals, which is wrong. We don't. Secondly, I feel, God, that's on a rant now.
Do it.
Secondly, I feel I was talking to PJ. So at least if this goes viral, I've got PJ.
We know who to blame.
Yeah. In that
growing.
people see the small press what it's called independent comic scene
Yeah.
as a stepping stone to somewhere else.
It's never
and
good enough to just
and
be
if
indie.
we actually stopped for a second, I can't think of any names now, and looked at all of the artists, writers, letterers, inkers, pencilers who have moved from the indie scene to either go to Marvel or DC or Image and Dark Horse, and you took all of those British creators, moved them back into the independent scene, and they brought their fan base, we would have a force to be reckoned with. And that's not taking anything away from the people who are still in the independent scene creating and stuff. What I'm saying is it's about changing the narrative, and the narrative at the moment is this is a stepping stone. I'm doing this until I get spotted.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I'm working for Geeks, so now I'm living the dream. And that is, after doing Geeks in it for 10 years and seeing the level of quality in the independent scene. And even today, I just sat in my hotel and I just randomly went to Comic House and randomly found a couple of indie comics to read. And the review I gave one of the comics was, the art style was reminding me of Darwin Cook. Like literally spot on to Darwin Cook. And this is just a random independent comic sitting in the comic house, had no reviews whatsoever. And the guy's only got 2 issues out. And it's of a certain quality and a standard that is amazing. And that's the problem that we have, is that people believe that stuff doesn't exist, and the only way to make it is to leave, is to do this for long enough to then leave.
Yeah. I mean, can I just say very quickly that I get those questions as well. And I'm self-published, and basically people are like, okay, but you're just waiting to be noticed, or, you know, are you making like a catalogue of work so you can then go and actually go to publishers and, you know, be someone?
Yeah.
And I'm like, not really. I'm doing actually pretty okay right now, and I'm having a really good time. But the fact that because I am self-published, suddenly I'm a nobody, and people are just like, oh, you're not actually legit because you're not with a publisher. It's just like, oh, okay.
Well, I think this was and I know I've spoken about this before, but certainly one of the driving forces in even wanting to have this weekend was frustration. It's been a very positive weekend, and a lot of wonderful things have come out of it, which I think is probably the best way to deal with frustration.
Yeah.
Something negative goes in and something kind of wonderful comes out the other end. But for me, it was this idea that there is still a really powerful, pervasive narrative about how you make comics, and the idea of breaking into comics. And I subscribed to it for the longest time. The idea that, like, you know, you get noticed, you pay your dues, and then the kind of like the hand of fate comes down and plucks you out.
It could be you.
Yeah, and suddenly
You are good
matter.
enough. You are a Marvel artist. Come here. Join the pantheon.
Well, that's entirely it. It's like, I think it kind of annoyed me to some extent that when we think about a comic writer, I say that because that's the thing I think of. We think of, I have this idea in my head of maybe even a British creator, you know, made their name somehow, got picked up by Image, is now, a crude term, but living the dream. And they get asked, how do you make comics? Like, how do you break into comics? And it's kind of reinforcing this old pathway that, we know, I did a thing, it got noticed, and then I didn't have to worry about this kind of thing. And suddenly the 5 a.m. test didn't apply to me anymore. Like, I go to a show because I have a fan base. I go to a show because I'm there, you know, on behalf of the publisher. And it's like, it just annoyed me that that does still happen. And it's still a legitimate and valid way. I don't want to diminish their achievements.
Yeah, of course.
But maybe it's 1 in 100. And the 99 other people will not get that opportunity. And so does that invalidate their achievements? You know, is it like, oh, I didn't get picked by the hand of fate. Oh, I didn't kind of move on. So have you failed? And I was like, no, of course you haven't. No,
the thing is, I think the indie comic creators don't. God, I'm going to be hated, aren't I?
We love you, Barry.
Indie comic creators don't realise how lucky they are, how inclusive this industry is. And I know because the industry that I primarily have worked in is the prose industry, which you've probably heard people talking about and whatever. And I can tell you, like, I had a particular argument with a writer, a well-known writer, I won't say who it is, where I'd explained to him at length how I went about getting my novel in the bookshop. How for me it was all about my novel needed to look as good as just one piece of advice in terms of getting a comic or anything into a bookshop is that your stuff should look as good as anything else on the shelf. So if someone picks it up, they don't automatically think, is this self-published? It should be as good as anything else on the shelf. Does that make sense? And with the tools that we have available to us now, it's doable. So I had this long conversation where I'd explained it to this writer, and he kind of looked down his nose at me and said, you know, but it's self-published, isn't it? So it's not really, is it? And that's one of the nicer conversations that I've had. But it never stopped me. You know, it sort of gave me fuel. And I had no other authors that were there kind of like championing me or helping me or saying, what do you need? How can I help you? Everything that I had to do by going online, doing research, buying books on print on demand and understanding it for myself. Whereas with the indie comic scene, when I sort of came into it from the point of view of wanting to do my own sort of comics and stuff, all I had to do was just ask someone. There was never not a time I was like, well, who can I ask? There was always someone waiting to sort of go, I'll help you. What do you need? What can I give you? And that is fantastic. You know, I still think that we need some sort of collective, some sort of organisation that can drive the whole thing forward. I think that's part of the problem, is that we're all really helpful, but we're all really fragmented.
Well, I mean, do you think, and I say this as devil's advocate, but do you feel the idea of getting a bunch of creators together to agree on one thing is like kind of herding cats? Like, would it be more kind of trouble than it's worth?
Well, yeah, there's a delicate balance, really, of making sure that you're being fair. I think if there is like a collective, like I don't know whether everyone's been talking about this a lot over this weekend, and I don't know whether like if there is a group that would advocate for comics, it's about keeping a really delicate balance of being fair and trying to do the right thing, and also being like drawing a line and saying, you know, you cannot just talk about something endlessly because nothing ever gets done. Like everyone has had an example of this happening in this community. This is going to be a really weird segue, and bear with me. But I watched this film. It's called if you want to see panels of people trying to get something done in a 10 times more stressful situation than this. It's called How to Survive a Plague.
Okay.
And it's all about dealing with the AIDS crisis. And it's about, different groups within the AIDS crisis of the gay community being like, how are we going to survive this? And even in that, this is a life and death situation. This isn't comics. This is like life and death. But even then, you've got people saying, no, we need to do it this way. No, we need to do it this way. Why aren't we doing this? You're being too commercial. You're being too lowbrow. And someone stands up at one point and says, this is a plague. This is a plague. We're trying to survive. And it's just, even in that situation, you've still got like the People's Front of Judea. Like, you're still going to get that. Like, the People's Front of Judea and the Popular Front. Like, it will always happen.
Yeah.
I think it's literally just trying to be as fair as you possibly can. But yeah, sorry, I feel like I've ranted about that.
No,
That was really good.
No, it's fine. And
useful thing.
it's interesting because it's something that's in the back of my mind. I always feel I have like a check kind of stopping me from doing, mostly doing stupid things. But I do wonder whether, and I'm guilty of this, I'm trying to ring fence me and mine to make me feel special. Is it like by saying, no, like I care about comics, but no, you're not comics because you're successful. Like, I mean, like my comics. Jenny, do you think like...
No, indie comics are really not like that, because we're very much like, oh, come and join us. At least that's the feeling I get all the time. So I just don't think that you would be like, no, you are far too commercial to be part of our group. I don't think that's just going to happen. Because it's like, as long as someone wants to join, it'll be like, yeah, come along. You have experiences that are probably going to be like really good for us to know about as well, if you're more commercial, stuff, how you want to put it. But like things like, speaking of commercial, like contracts, a lot of indie creators don't know how to read them. And I'm lucky that I'm together with someone who's got a law degree, so he can read my contracts, because I literally cannot understand them. Like, literally, I do not understand the English in them. And I've been about to sign some really stupid things, but because I had him there, he could stop me. And like, if we could have somehow some kind of collective or something of people helping new and indie people to actually read contracts and make sure they don't get into trouble, because there's so many horror stories now of people just getting into stuff that because they didn't understand what they were signing, essentially.
Because we did have the comics, was it the Comics Defence Fund?
That's in America, yeah.
Is that-
The Comics Defence
Yeah,
Fund.
it
It
still
still
does
does
go.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It still does go.
Yeah.
It's the end of the
But
day.
We don't
I-
have that in the UK, do we?
I
At all?
thought
It
we had something
covers
like that.
some of it covers the UK. I think it what it does. I think it's the Comics Defence Fund, the Comics Defence League. It's just on a case by. From what I gather, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like it's on a case by case basis, and it's
Okay.
basically a collective of funds.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have a specific problem, like for example, I think they did it with the guy who made Rocket Raccoon. I think he might have got some fund, maybe I can't remember.
idea.
But there's
I was accident receiving makeup.
yeah. Sorry if you didn't. Should I repeat it for the microphone?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he had health issues, the fund helped him with that problem. So I think that's more a case by case basis. But I think in the past I was speaking to Steve Tanner earlier, we did have a guild in the 90s. So I've got a list of people that I want to email and say, how did this work? That kind of functioned. Yeah, that kind of functioned on this level, but it kind of petered out. So it's a question of, what was it called? I think it was called the Comics Creators Guild within the UK.
Yeah,
So-
it was, yeah.
So the question might be, is this a revolutionary idea?
No.
Or does it always just go
No.
through cycles
No.
and
No.
it rises, it falls, it rises,
Literally.
it falls?
Like I said, I've been doing GS for 11 years, it'll be this year, and probably, to be minimal, I'll say 11 times.
Really?
Every year,
Yeah.
someone will talk about, let's get everyone together.
So it's a bit of a Matrix situation where they just keep rebuilding Zion over and over
Yeah.
and over again. Yeah.
And everyone has their memory wipes,
Yeah.
you have no idea.
In this situation, I'm not
Yeah.
Neo, I can't dodge bullets or anything like that. But yeah, and and when you kind of see it, when you can sort of step away, it does sometimes get a little bit disheartening. But I do know, I keep going back to prose, but I do know now with the self-publishing scene on that side, they now have something which I think is called the Independent Authors, something I can't think what it's called now.
Well, there you
The
go.
Association of
You should be
Independent
sitting here.
Would you like to join us?
Another pillar.
But they offer a lot of different services like reading contracts and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
that's
and
what we need.
formatting and helping you, and basically it's basically putting a wrapper around what we do anyway, which is helping your fellow indie creator.
I think what I'd personally love to see is some kind of resource or organisation or whatever. It's a bit pie in the sky, but I'd love to think that if any young creators are considering making comics, they could look at anyone in this room and go like, yeah, that's a legitimate path I want to follow. And it wasn't settling, it wasn't,
Yeah.
giving up on anything. It was like, no, that is just how the majority of comics are made. Sorry, I noticed we have a question in the front.
Yeah, well, what we're talking about now, I'd say there's some really good books these days where they go through all these sort of various things, so that's quite good. But what came out yesterday from some of the panels, particularly with Hayley from the independent comic shops and stuff, and it seems to me when I was getting into this industry, learning how does it work, the massive stumbling block that we all face, and it's like maybe it's the elephant in the room, is because Diamond's the monopoly that we then can't use, we're then blocked out of we don't have enough money to engage with that because it's on such a big scale. We therefore can't get into it, and therefore we can't reach the people at the other end who have the bookshop who would quite like to have an indie book, but because they can't get it through the distributor, they can't get it. And so you talk to them, and they're like, "Oh, we'd like to do your book." So the way that it works is you send it to us direct, and maybe they do it on consignment or whatever. But it's interesting when I was looking at normal books and a different industry with books, is that they all use a distributor, but in that industry there's a few of them. So that so it's a Christian bookshops. Christian bookshops, they have like 2 or 3 distributors, So what I'm saying is maybe we should all rise up. But we need to have
Against
an
the People's Vote of
alternative, which is what was said, right? We need an alternative to diamonds. There's somebody who's not a creative person like us, but is a numbers person and a business person needs to say, there are loads of people with indie comics that need to get places. There are loads of people that want indie comics, and then they need to, there needs to be like a warehouse where they can just be a distributor and do it that way, and have a different. Because it's not like it wouldn't make money, because you pay to have your pictures in the book rather than just a listing. Like you do with Diamond, but it'd be cheaper because indie, and then they could go, I buy my marble from the Diamond, brilliant, no problem, buy it from them. But then if I want to splash out and have a look around for something a bit interesting, different and new for my shop, I turn to this distributor and might buy a couple of those, and it's like we need that. We need somebody who actually understands.
But that's what we talked about last night, and I can't remember exactly.
Shall I say what we were saying last night?
Please do.
Yeah, no, please do.
Because I think the major thing with having someone who is a dedicated distributor is that all of us want to make comics. That's a big thing. All of us want to make things. Yes. So the problem is finding someone who is dedicated to do that. Yeah. You need someone else. So I think a short-term thing is to just have, as we said, there have been people who've tried this over and over and over again. But I think one of the major problems is that we have all these resources, but they're not forward-facing. Is one thing, and also they're not united. So we've got things like CATS, and then we've also got CVA and things on Facebook, and then we've also got Luke. Is it Luke Hyde? No, it's not Luke Hyde. What's his last name?
Searle?
Luke Searle, I'm so sorry. Who does things he does the convention lists, and things have been tried. We just need a united thing. So it's to have a group or a guild that is similar to, I don't know if anyone knows the Association of Illustrators.
Could I also ask a question of the room? Is anyone familiar with, I believe it's the Scottish Independent Comic Book Association?
No.
Because
Sickbath.
I put an F on the end because I thought it looked good.
Sickbath.
And honestly, because I can't remember the perfect acronym, which makes searching for it and doing my research a little tricky. But it occurred to me that as we're having this discussion has surfaced a lot in the last few weeks, I think someone might actually already be doing this kind of north of the border in Scotland. I know there is a new kind of independent comic book awards up in Scotland.
I've seen some bits on Twitter where people are being nominated for the Scottish Book Awards, and I was like,
And
new. Oh, new.
And it's interesting because if I had a bit more time, I would have reached out to them to see if we couldn't get a representative down to talk about what's going on. But it's interesting to see that the model, if that is what we're considering a guild or so, has been done in right now and appears to be functioning.
Do you know how long it's been going on?
I believe it's only within the last year or so.
Okay, so it's really fresh.
Really new. But it's interesting because the award ceremony is an associated part of that. It's almost like if you need a sense of togetherness to kind of bind the group together, it was almost like you're part of the thing and there's also an award.
Do they have, because I know Nick had a really great, when we were talking about the Association of Illustrator things, when he was saying about having, basically, if you were to join this group, having a directory of just every single person who is a comic creator within the UK who is a member, and sending that out to comic book shops. So, it wouldn't be a case of having, because I think trying to get a distributor at this stage and trying to have someone who's going to distribute it, it's such a massive job to try and get someone to say, hey, you're going to distribute all of these.
And expensive.
Really expensive.
So you've got to pay for that space in the warehouse.
And
you've got to get someone to do all the admin.
Can I just jump in a second and say that actually was attempted?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, it was attempted.
But it was attempted.
It was attempted, yeah. The problem that I've seen whenever we as a community have tried to do this is that it is not easy. It's not an easy thing to set up. Even the thing about having awards, trying to have an awards thing. I know I've been involved in trying to set up indie awards and quite quickly backed away from it because because everyone's like, we need to have this category and that category and this category, and why haven't you got this person or that person in mind? It really is a sort of ticking time bomb to do it. And if you look at the what Football used to do with, because they do sort of comic awards and stuff. But if you notice over the years, they cut down the amount of categories that they had to, I think there's like 4 now. But again, something like that, I believe it would be great to have something like that at the levels of like your Eisners or whatever, which is a professionally run independent comic awards.
Yeah, but we've got to keep it. I think the key here is to keep everything really, really simple and basic to start off.
Yeah.
And if this turns out well, and it actually doesn't just go, then you know it will be. We can then we can then sort of try to, you know, make other things out of it.
Because even at the basic level, just having a website which literally just has all of this advice. So in someone who's new to comics, so
how
like,
do I do indies? Help me.
You know, like what Rich was saying yesterday about on his site, there's loads of advice about printing and bleeds and stuff like that. But you have to know that's where it is. Whereas if you've got a central site where all that information is there for the taking.
I think like the important thing is as well is that it's public facing.
Yes.
So you know, we had this big thing a couple of months ago where the BBC was like, "Hey, look at comics in the UK. Here's 2018 and a superhero. Goodbye." Like, you know, and everyone was just like, "Oh, really?" Whereas if we had something that said, you know, Comics Guild UK. Here is, you know, this is the state of the industry. Here is a directory of artists. Here is, you know, if you want to contact this person, here it is. You know, and it's a place where, you know, you can advocate for comics, and it's like a one-stop shop. That's what you know, and if, you know, because I don't think, I think starting it off with like we have to have legal advice and we have to have a distributor, that's never going to get done because those things are so expensive. At least if you have like a starting off point of like, this is where you go, and you don't have to go through Facebook. You don't have to go on like,
please.
you don't have to go on a Wix site. It looks like a proper website, and it has proper branding. You know, it has, you know, an administrator that you can contact. It has a dedicated Twitter that reblogs useful things, not like I had a vegan sandwich. I love vegan sandwiches because I just moan going, oh, I feel so ill today. So you know, I can't complain. But you know, you've got like all these dedicated things that look professional and legitimize us. And so even if like we are just a group of people going, oh God, you know, it looks like we're shit hot basically.
Yeah,
because we
that's
are.
what
We
we
are
need.
shit hot. We just need that.
And I think that does the almost community service of offering advice. I think is a really good thing, because it's like it's a personal bugbear of mine, but I always feel like if you're going to have a publisher, they have to do something for you that you can't do yourself.
Yeah, like get you into shops.
And I feel kind of calling yourself a publisher is one of the easiest things you can do. Actually delivering as a publisher is quite a different matter.
Technically, I am a publisher because I have ISBNs.
Yeah.
Please don't send me your stuff. I am not a publisher.
Wait, do I become a publisher if I get ISBNs?
Technically, because you have to have like a name. You have to choose like a publication name, like a publication house.
Oh my
I
God.
can help you. It's a
Yes,
terrible
please.
name. I want to change it, so I'm not even going to say it.
Okay.
But it's something I was just like, oh God, that. And now I'm like, oh God, I have to publish under this forevermore.
But I think, and maybe this goes back into like kind of advice for young creators, but again, I would love the idea if when a creator is starting out and maybe they think, oh, I need a publisher. Like I need a publisher. I'd like to kind of say to people, it's like,
Here you go.
well,
There's a list.
Yeah, also a list of trusted publishers, but also a list of like things to do if you don't need a publisher. You know, it's almost like so many people here have kind of like made their stuff from scratch, and it exists. Like it's not like, oh, you made one copy. It's like, no, people here have done big print runs, you know, and they're selling the books themselves, and they're doing, you know, making respectable progress with it.
Also as well, again, this is another hot potato, diversity. So, you know, over the years I've been asked to moderate panels, and more recently I've actually been asked to put together panels, and to sort of get guests together or whatever. And you know, there is this sort of push to sort of make panels as diverse as possible. Wow, look, we've done really well. We have.
Hello.
We are a rainbow of talent.
And when that's not done, everyone comes down on a ton of bricks, and I see really good convention organisers getting absolutely hammered online because they're not doing it. But part of the reason, and now because I've kind of taken a peek behind the curtain, as it were, one of the reasons I think, well, one of the things I think would help is if there was a directory of all of the creators in the UK with photos or images of those creators.
Like they do in Imagine Effects.
Yes.
Those
Yeah.
really nice little...
That someone who is putting together a convention.
Maybe not this photo though, please. Thank you.
That's the best one.
For the podcast, it
Use
is
that
my
one.
beautiful face.
You'll be able to
Put it in
filter
your
the
face.
directory by seriousness.
You'll never get a better photo of me than that. It's just I was
Mine is just my brand, so it's fine.
This is my brand now. Shit.
But just from the point of view, and I don't mean like that, so that someone can literally come down and do a checklist and go right, but that someone can actually put together. If someone is putting together a panel about inkers or letterers or whatever, they want to make a diverse panel, there's a place they can go to research those people.
And also, like, you know, people would suddenly go like, well, am I good enough to be on there? And you go like, look, are you making comics?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're on it.
come on in. You know, it's like,
and I think because otherwise what tends to happen is that people pick from their own gene pool. People pick from their own knowledge, their own friends that they know, their colleagues and stuff like that. And if you're really lucky, then you have just by nature, you have a diverse mix of colleagues and friends and stuff like that you can kind of call upon. If you're not so lucky, then you don't, and you end up calling upon people that you do know.
Yeah.
And it's only when they're all sitting on the panel together and then someone tweets something online that you suddenly go, oh,
Shit.
And generally that is how it is. There is a very fine line between, you know, ignorance in terms of how you put something together and people being called racist. And it really bothers me that I see people getting hit over the head with that, when 9 times out of 10 that isn't what they were
When
doing.
all they needed was
All
like
they-
at one point someone going, it's all white.
Yeah.
You know, and they would go, oh shit, everybody's white. Like, you know,
Which we've
everybody's
done,
male,
right?
everybody's straight.
Behind the scenes, I've kind of
Yeah.
gently kind of nudged, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, just have another look, another shuffle, you know. However, let's be open about that and go, part of the reason why it's difficult is my name is Barry Nugent. So unless you see that picture, you're not going to know I'm a black guy. If my name was Barry, like, Akimbo, and you didn't say, no, it's true, and we're not, but it's true. I know because I've had this. You would make an assumption, he's probably African, he's probably black. And so what I'm saying is, by trying to kind of talk about the elephant in the room openly and having some sort of direction where people can actually see who would be coming and what their skill set is, not just a random picture of people, but what their skill set is, what they do, what comics they've put out, then it's
perfect.
it's gonna help. It's really gonna help people put in, because I guarantee you they're struggling when they're putting together these panels.
well, even when you went as, sorry,
Oh, no, sorry. I don't know. But I was just going to ask, like, you know, just to get another straw poll, if this is this something that people would be interested in?
Oh, yeah.
And as a, like, as a follow-up question, if someone said, for example, you know, if people could chip in, like, a tenner, 20 quid, would they do it? So first question is anybody interested?
Pretty much
most people
everyone.
are interested. And second of all, like, would you chip in money? Like, providing it wasn't like, so Association of Illustrators is 80 quid upwards. So, but we wouldn't ask, no, we would not ask that. That's the thing, like, tenner, 20 quid, and then, you know.
For the benefit of the listener at home, 1,000 people just fainted.
Yeah, exactly. Because I remember as a student being like, oh, you should join the association.
That's
and
what
I was
they
like,
told me as well.
exactly.
We went to the same uni.
course. And I was just like, no.
It's the same.
I will just say, there's been a lot of talk about like Patreon and stuff, and how the vast majority of money people make on Patreon isn't by people that want the content, it's just by people that want to support the artists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't have to ask people for money to join, I'd happily donate money.
Exactly.
Well, I had.
Like a lot of people would be.
Yeah, well, I had, we had a Patreon for Geek Syndicate, which was set up, and I then started to feel really guilty because we weren't putting on enough, what I believed was enough content for people. I felt so guilty to the point that probably about a month ago, I shut down our Patreon.
Oh Oh.
And I said, look, this is and Dave and I talked about it, and I did an email and put a thing on Patreon. I said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm going to shut the Patreon down because I feel somehow bad because I'm taking money, even though the money is going back into Geek Syndicate. I'm not going down KFC.
That you
with it,
really, you really shouldn't feel bad though.
But
It's
no,
like
but-
a glorified tip jar.
Yeah, but I think from, and maybe it's different because we're podcasting as opposed to actually providing something. And even though we were doing like little kind of snippets from the show and behind the
There are
scenes stuff.
tons of podcasters on
But,
Patreon.
yeah, but I think because we weren't doing it from what I consider to be from a regular standpoint, and
Right.
certainly from the reasons that I'd laid out as to why we were doing the Patreon, I didn't feel we were living up to it. I decided to stop, and then the minute I stopped, I got a couple of emails from people saying, so I wasn't interested in the content. I was interested in the content that you were giving me. I listened to Geek Syndicate anyway. I just wanted to do something to support you guys, and I didn't realise that until I sort of closed the doors.
Sorry, Barry, this is a question over from Jack.
I was saying, you were mentioning that you shut it down because you didn't feel you were providing what you felt was enough content. I think if you weren't doing that, people would have left the Patreon, they would have started voicing their concerns.
Yeah.
The fact that they are putting their money where their mouth is saying, like you said, they didn't care about the content we're giving, but supporting you guys as creators. I think that's more what it is. It's not about money, like cash for a service or a product. It is about support.
It's really easy.
Saying, I totally support that. Actually going, no, I'm going to support that. I'll just give you $1 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really easy as well. If you are a patron and you don't want to be one anymore, you can just be like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So it's super easy to just like drop a pledge.
Yeah.
So it's more not hassle, but there is a little bit more work to actually become a patron. So if someone is a patron of yours, it's because they really want to be.
Yeah.
It's still not a lot of hassle. It's just signing up for a site, but still, they sign up for a site.
I think kind of taking the patron model, which is interesting, and applying it to something like this, a comics guild, if you will, is a very interesting idea. But I think it's interesting because money is both the solution and the problem, isn't it? Because it's at the moment money becomes involved, it gets very messy, and you need that transparency, as you kind of spoke of.
Yeah.
And yet, sorry, I'll shut up in a second. But yet, with no. But with the money, it would facilitate doing so much, and it wouldn't even have to be a lot of money, I think.
No, but I think there are issues in terms of if it is going to be a collective, like for Big Punch, for example, you guys are a limited company. So for the problems that we had with the advocacy group is that we had a treasurer, we became a limited company. So that's the thing, if you start getting, the main reason they did that is because they had Welsh government funding. So another thing that I would consider like later on is trying to approach the National Lottery, because we are a massive creative force. There's is it the Creative Arts Fund? There's tons of stuff.
On that subject, and I don't know, I haven't really talked about it that much, but I know I've talked about it with you guys. Like, I was on the phone with my dad the other day, and I was talking about coming out here for this, and he was telling me he was at a fundraiser thing, and he met the UK Comics Laureate, and I was like,
What?
who? Like, the what?
I believe it's Charlie Adler.
Yeah, it's Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. It's like the fact that's the sort of thing I thought or you guys would know who that was, but like that's weird to me that because laureates are like kind of like like a state thing. They're like like.
Honestly, oh, sorry.
Yeah, but like that's the thing.
Keep jumping in. I'm sorry.
Like that to me. It's like, and I said to you, John, I was like, I'd go just ask my dad, did you get his email or did you get his business card or something, or to talk to the person who organised that event and get his contact or something. Just because I feel like that's someone who probably should know about something like this and should be championing.
How do they pick that? How do you become that?
Yeah, because
He beat
wasn't
the last laureate.
was
in
Dave
combat.
Gibbons one? He was one, wasn't he? Yeah. Yeah.
It's decided every year
Yeah.
and done as part of the Arts Council England.
Okay.
It's not like the Eisteddfod when you get a bloody great sword.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
On a sidebar, one of my Welsh great uncles
Not a
has
bard.
a throne. You either win a
Winnie
crown.
the Bard!
Yeah, he was a bard. Yeah, you either win a crown
Honestly,
or a throne, and
so
he's got
bizarre.
like a little wooden throne back home. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
God, a
Game of
bard.
Thrones.
That's amazing.
I think Sorry.
No, I was just saying to fill the space.
No, I keep talking. Please stop.
No, go for it,
You're
Sarah.
really
Take
good
it.
at talking.
Take it, Sarah. Go on.
I think the important thing is, if anybody's listening or like here today and they know things about a previous comic guild or comics laureate, if they're sitting there being like, oh, these guys should shut up, we've done this already, like email me or someone else, or just tweet or say something, just so that we've got that conversation. Because I think the big thing is, like, I was talking to Steve Tanner earlier and he was like, oh yeah, you know, all of these people have done it before, and you were saying as well, like, everybody, this has been done before, like, let's gather all that knowledge into a nice knowledge pot and stir it up and make something.
Because I think
good soup.
It's all about the narrative needs to change. Keep saying that word a lot, but it is like, so I knew like Charlie Adler was this year's comic laureate because we did a panel with Charlie, and I knew before it was Dave Gibbons, but because it's so, our industry is so fragmented, we're not, because what you kind of want is Charlie at the spearhead of that to a certain extent, and then you kind of like, that's what you want. But at the moment, what you've got is Charlie's over there, people over there, people over there, and you've got little guilds and little communities over there, and what we need to find a way is to kind of bring them all sort of together, which is but the difficulty with doing that sometimes, I feel, is all of these little guilds and stuff, sometimes they're okay where they are. And I think what we need to do is take it very slowly, because what tends to happen is, let's do a guild, and everyone starts, and people start talking about distributors and money and stuff like that, and then it all just, before it even gets going, I think if you're starting small, just saying, let's get a professionally looking website going, just even that is
sometimes that's half about, and I agree entirely, because I feel the moment you do start talking guilds, unions, associations, it can throw up warning signs, and maybe rightly so, because that's not a light step to undertake.
Also, the thing is, people are independent.
And I think a big fear of mine would be the moment you made a group that somehow became the definitive group that represented comics, you would have a kind of, you're either with us or against us kind of mentality, and you don't want people to feel, look, I have nothing against you, I just don't want to join the guild or the union, and you wouldn't want people suddenly getting blacklisted because they weren't able to. And I know that's like dystopian kind of stuff.
That's exactly what my plan is.
But
blacklisted by the guilds.
The fear is real, and I feel
this is like a D&D campaign.
But I feel sometimes by kind of picturing our kind of worst impulses kind of taken to their extreme, it can be a good check. And I wonder whether, and certainly one of the more promising kind of really ideas that excites me is this idea that find a website, find a name, find a brand, and a hub which becomes like a kind of a resource pool, which becomes a way of protecting comics. Because I feel the best way to get people on board is to demonstrate that you have their best interests at heart.
Yes, because I know like Luke Searle was talking about that. It's like having this hub, and I don't know what happened to it. I think I need to email him and be like, you know, what happened? But it is one of those things that's been attempted before, obviously, but yeah, I think like the solution really is just complete transparency with whatever you do. Everything is there's, you know, if you have meetings, there's an agenda, there's minutes, there's recorded, you know, there's a what's it? It's not a manifest. What am I thinking of? When you have like a company and you have like the charter. There is a charter.
This is very interesting,
things
because
like that makes it so that it's like this is accessible to everyone.
In the back of my head, like a weird little mantra for the past year, I think ever since like, it was about a year ago when there was an odd MCM where I think a lot of people came away quite unhappy, and you know, I kind of had a little ranty, cathartic blog about it,
which I read and I loved.
Thank you, by the way. But I
didn't even get that far. I just went on Twitter and went,
this is the odd thing, because I was talking about this the other day, and I wanted to link to your point of view, and it's like, where is it? And I was like, oh, it was on Twitter, that's why. It's about like 15
it was on my notepad that I screenshotted and put on Twitter, and then went to sleep and forgot about and regretted. But,
well, that's the thing, like I wrote that with when I wrote my kind of thing, which turned into like this mini like 2,000 word essay, and I think Alex at Pipe Dream Comics very kindly reprinted it. It really wasn't written with an agenda or anything in mind. It was simply, and it wasn't even was a bit of frustration, but for full transparency, we had a fairly good show
Yeah.
at that show.
Same
It wasn't
here.
even like we were. It just kind of hurt me to see my friends suffering in a weird way, and I was kind of like, well, hang on a minute, you're really good. Why didn't it work for you? And it seemed to be as simple as like whatever aisle you were in, the flow of people was badly designed or something.
Yeah.
Some people had a really good show, and then people like very close to you had a bad show simply because people didn't walk by them. And it seemed like such a petty thing for a show's success to hinge upon. And so I just wrote this kind of blog post, kind of like just having a little kind of like laying it all out there, complaining about what was annoying, talking about what I liked. And that really was like the kind of the seeds that was kind of like sowing the seeds for what became today, really, in an odd way. And I've really lost track of where I was going with this.
It was beautiful though. I loved
Yeah.
it. We went on a journey.
I think the thing is, you know, and I've said it's been done many times. People have tried it many times before, and what I'm trying to say, not from a negative point of view, because I think sometimes the argument is whenever you say, even what you've done here this weekend, which I'm sure everyone will agree, has been fantastic. I've heard over the years people say the very same thing. Wouldn't it be good if we could have a convention where indie creators could come and listen to other indie creators? And then loads of people are going, oh, I don't know about that, or that won't work, or what about this, or what about that? And what you've done is actually gone, I really want to swear, but I'm not going to. I really want to go, like, you know, F that, I'm going to do it anyway, because it's a good idea and it's got value. And I think even with trying to set up some sort of guild, or whether you do a website or whatever, just because people have tried it before and it's not worked, doesn't mean it's not a great idea of value. And it is, it's a great idea of value, and it should.
And the actual scene has now changed a lot as well.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for you to get noticed on the internet. And I think, you know, if we can try to do it now, as opposed to, you know, I don't know, in the 90s or whatever you said, the other one was.
tools we have.
Yeah, with tools we have now. Can you imagine, like, us trying to do this in the 90s?
Don't be knocking pouches. What's that?
Like, we could achieve a lot, I think. And also because it's a lot, even speaking of money for a second, it's even so much cheaper nowadays, even compared to a few years before, to actually just get your own website up and, you know, hosting and all that stuff. And you've got all these tools with WordPress and whatever. It doesn't cost almost anything to do it. So just doing like a simple thing of a website to start off is, I think, a really good idea.
Sorry, just Ned.
Well, I think actually, Jenny actually just kind of answered my question a bit, but like, to be like the boring adult in the room for a minute, like this feels a bit like a meeting that any of us have had at work, like where like, you know, we're all talking about ideas, and we're all like throwing things out there, we're all setting up pieces and stuff, but at the end of those meetings, what always happens is, what is the next step?
Yeah.
What are the action points? Like what are you guys, like any of you gonna, like what's the thing that needs to happen? Like, it sounds like the website is the thing.
I think that's the easiest thing, because we have got all these things that we want to do, and I think everyone just wants to have like this massive thing and you know, have awards and whatever. But like, we can't do that right now. We can't do distribution and stuff right now. This is crazy. So just do the simple thing of a website. I think that's the logical next step.
Because it will build up goodwill, which is what you kind of need.
Exactly.
You need to build goodwill so
and
that
it's the easiest way to get us seen by everyone.
I would almost go as far as to say like a kind of step zero in a weird way. If we're actually going to give this a shot, it would be find a name that we're kind of happy with.
Barry's Guild.
Barry's Guild.
Yes.
The logo is your face.
It might need a bit of work.
Like where's the river sailor?
Dig for victory. And I would, and even just see if a URL is available. I know it's like the stupidest thing, but you can buy
Twitter's available.
That's simple. Yeah.
Twitter.
Twitter is available. I almost
just
registered.
Comics Guild.
Comics Guild UK.
Yeah.
Comics Guild isn't registered. So no.
But
that's available. In terms of websites, there is a Comics Guild in the US. I don't know how active it is. And there's also things like there's the Sydney Comics Guild. There's a couple of other things that are like location specific. But I think it's like building that infrastructure to make everything happen.
All I wanted to add to that, and I say this not as the de facto come to me, but I say this as
Fearless leader.
I glorious leader. Thank you. No, but I say this simply. We are here today, and as much as I kind of maybe got the ball rolling, like what really made it work was you lot getting involved, because otherwise I would have just been sitting in a room on my own, and that isn't just the panelists, even though all the panelists this weekend have been fantastic. It's actually just you lot engaging. So if only to keep this momentum going, we are, I was thinking we've got like a little box to collect your thoughts. I was going to put out a survey after the fact anyway. It may even be as simple as saying, like, look, if you'd like to hear more about this, if you want to be kind of part of this, I may simply ask you to say yes or give your email address, because even if a newsletter is the only, because the danger is we're all going to drift off now to the four corners of the earth, and we're.
Can I just do a straw poll? I've never heard that term before. I have a show of hands. Who has a Twitter account here? Okay, leave your hands up. Who here has done a tweet about the Comic Summit? So you've all tweeted about the Comic Summit. Okay, good. So I would say keep that going with more talk about this guild idea, because I think this needs to grow. I mean, it's one thing we've talked about, doing the guild and all that sort of stuff, but I think what you've done here is fantastic, and this I would like to see grow.
Yeah.
Well, no, and thank you, and I feel it's very important to almost separate me from that. Like, I'm very keen, if this does come back, if we do this again, and actually, quick straw poll, would anyone like to see this again? Would anyone like to come back? Okay, that's pretty good. No, I mean, like, mob rule,
There's like sure. One person, like,
no.
I wasn't going to put my hand up, and everyone put their hands up.
Really like crying in the corner. I'm so warm.
but it's like, I would love to hand this over in a way. Like, if we can get momentum going and the summit becomes something which is run by the community, so it isn't just me, it should never be just one person, then that would be a dream come true. And in the interest of full disclosure, I mean, this isn't a money-making exercise. We were very lucky to be able to offer this for free, and while it didn't break the bank to put on, there was some financial outlay, and my point being, and that's not to play the world's smallest violin for sympathy, that was simply just to say, if we do it again, maybe we will charge for tickets, maybe like £1 or £2 or something small like that, just to keep it.
It's fine.
Again, it doesn't need to be a Patreon, even if we do make a website and there's just a little donate button.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
That can just go towards paying for the next event.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just renting a room for a bunch of people to sit in once a year.
Well, thank you, and I'm sorry, Jenny.
I can't remember if you were the person who said that you weren't too keen on Kickstarter, but have you thought about just kickstarting?
I think again,
just the fund to like rent a room.
Oh no, entirely. And I think like Kickstarter, in terms of my issues with Kickstarter are in terms of discovery. But if you're bringing an engaged audience to a thing, that's a different matter.
Yeah.
So there are loads of options on how to get the money for it. It's just about who's going to do it. That's the main thing. Like, we can get the money for it, but how are we going to actually organise it?
But if this guild actually does get off the ground, I would be so happy for the summit to almost become an associated event for that. Like, even if it's just like my worst case scenario this weekend, we all just got together and moaned. Like, we all just got together.
Cathartic.
We got together, got drunk and surly, and just moaned about our lot. And actually, it wasn't that. It's been immensely positive and quite uplifting, and a little emotional at times. And so that was the worst case scenario, and I think it turned out a lot better than I could have possibly hoped for. So I would love, let's get this rolling. If you want to be involved next year, do let me know, even if like in an organisational capacity. But we can pass ownership over to the community, and this can just become something that keeps going.
In terms of boring admin, if you want someone to set up a Trello, I'm very good at that. I can set you up a Trello.
I love a good Trello.
Let's do this.
Sorry, without really intending, I ended up kind of hogging the conversation a bit towards the end there, but do we have any final questions? Because we have run over by about 20 minutes. I was wondering if we want to start kind of tying everything.
Go!
Aid, do you... I'm recording all this, apparently.
Everybody.
What time's your coach? Do you need a lift? Round of applause for Ned, our go-to chauffeur. I just, you know, bye.
I'm sure everyone on the podcast is saying goodbye.
I guess just, if no one minds, I just want to say thank you all for coming. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, this is a bit of an experiment, and you know, you being here has been incredible. And you know, thank you to everyone who helped out. Thank you to my Big Punch colleagues. Thank you to Ned, who just, you know, ran out. Thank you to Nikki for all the support. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, please, you know, keep in touch. We'll send out a kind of little newsletter after. Oh, we'll send out like a little form, get your feedback. And I guess just to get on my soapbox, I wanted to share the best piece of advice I ever received. There's nothing more overrated than a good idea. So do something about it. Thank
Also,
you.
can I say one last thing?
Oh, please don't.
P.S. No, it's a show of hands. It's a show of hands. Just wait for it.
Okay.
Can I have a show of hands? Who, at the moment, has a comic? Right. Congratulations, you've broken into comics.
Yes!
We solved
We
it.
made it!